Civic Pride built the Sioux Falls Coliseum, and Civic Pride kept the building from being demolished and gave it a new life. Despite two fires, vote after vote, and the sifting political sands of a town that always wanted more, the Coliseum remained the center of Sioux Falls' cultural, social, and often sports life for 80 years before being reborn. Those who toured the country in the middle part of the century generally stopped at the Coliseum. Presidents, boxing champions, movie stars, world-class musicians, and so many others graced the building with their presence. In 1916, the possibility of war loomed on the horizon, but closer to home, thoughts were on the need to expand services to the growing city of Sioux Falls. In an era of prosperity, a growing city looked to the future and planned a bigger, better auditorium that could house larger gatherings, big conventions, and make Sioux Falls the best city in the state. The question became one of civic pride and good business. Safety and seating were the two biggest concerns, getting away from wood frame structures and also having seating for up to 4,000 if possible. The original plan would have replaced the 1899 City Auditorium at the corner of 9th and Dakota. It was built hurriedly after local leaders convinced the National Buttermakers Association to hold its 1899 convention in Sioux Falls. The building housed an auditorium, city offices, and the fire department. The move to replace the 17-year-old auditorium was already gaining momentum, and a committee recommended to the City Commission that they should build a $125,000 Coliseum. They provided 400 signed petitions from citizens along with their proposal. There's no argument against making Sioux Falls the best city in the state, one newspaper stated. No man can conscientiously vote against the new auditorium bonds next Tuesday. No man can vote against it without hurting Sioux Falls and himself. Why wait until other towns get the right kind of a building for big meetings, shows, conventions, etc.? Newspaper ads used an imposing photograph of a massive brick building with 9 arched entrances leading into it and stated, "There is no doubt we have outlived and outgrown the old frame auditorium. We want and need a larger and safer building in which to promote both business and pleasure affairs of the city." The Coliseum bonds easily won public approval in 1916 with 2/3 majority. Progress should have been easy with the public backing the new Coliseum, but that wasn't the case. Even before the election, controversy flared about where the new Coliseum should be built. A committee that included noted business leaders, including L.D. Manchester, J.W. Fenn, Samuel Fantle, and A.W. Tudhill, had purchased an option to buy the old tennis courts for $20,000 that they had proposed for the new building. Questions began to swirl about what was in it for the steering committee that helped pass the measure. Plans for the new building stayed on track for most of 1916. Architect Joseph Schwartz was hired to design the new building. His resume included the Carnegie Library, Manchester Biscuit Company, Masonic Temple, County Jail, and Central Fire Station. The proposed 3-story Coliseum and City Hall that was designed was an imposing structure 138 feet long and 150 feet wide, with room for city offices and a large exhibit hall on the first floor, with an auditorium on the second floor ringed by balconies. Grand staircases and room enough for 3,500 patrons were proposed. But plans for the new City Hall and auditorium went awry after bids were opened and came in $40,000 over budget. City leaders opened the discussion back up to the citizens, with many ideas being brought forward, including separating the City Hall from the auditorium, using the main floor for the much-needed heating plant, and selling the land at cost and building on cheaper land. In June of 1917, a new Coliseum was designed by Schwartz for the corner of 5th and Main. The building was of similar dimensions as the previous attempt, but without the addition of a city hall. The first floor would include an auditorium to seat 3,000, a lobby, and a few offices, and the balcony would stretch around three sides to add up to 1,500 more seats. The new design was 19th and early 20th century Art Deco or Renaissance Revival style. Sioux Falls Construction Company was hired to build the Coliseum with a bid of just over $92,000. They set out immediately, working day and night to complete the project ahead of the first scheduled tenant in the fall. Timing was tight, but the building opened November 26, 1917 for the South Dakota Education Association. Trains brought teachers from as far away as Pierre and the Black Hills, with reception committees welcoming them to the city and ushering them to hotels and the new Coliseum. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with the building and floor space for exhibits. Although the educators were the first to open the building, the formal dedication was saved for New Year's Day. The Red Cross Ball had the honor of officially opening the Coliseum. An informal reception that afternoon for everyone in town kicked off the festivities with the formal dance starting at 9 p.m. that evening. Couples paid $3 to dance to the music from a 15-piece orchestra seated on stage, while others paid 50 cents to sit in the balcony and watch the festivities below. The official opening was also its closing night for several months, as war rationing of coal was needed. The decision was made to close the building until warmer weather. Once it reopened, the new Coliseum quickly became the focus of busy city life, hosting concerts, conventions, and even basketball games. When President Woodrow Wilson toured the country looking for support for America to join the League of Nations, he stopped in Sioux Falls and spoke at the Coliseum. 8,000 people found every nook inside to hear what the president had to say. The rousing speech brought thunderous applause to the choice words spoken by the president in September of 1919. World-class ballerinas, pianists, symphonies, plays, and comedians graced the stage in the early years. John Philip Sousa conducted his band in 1928 to sold-out crowds. The growing city clamored for entertainment of every variety and was rewarded with some of the finest touring groups available at the time. By the early 1930s, rumblings were already being made that the Coliseum needed to be expanded. During conventions, the floor space was not adequate to display many items. Others wanted a bigger stage, to add a plaster proscenium, and add an annex for more room. The question became one of pride. The state's largest city wanted to host even larger events such as circuses, automobile shows, stock shows, and machinery shows. After a few failed public votes, the City Commission put $60,000 into the budget to remodel the stage and add better equipment for traveling shows. In September of 1931, the remodeled Coliseum officially reopened. This pattern of renovating the building would be repeated many times in its history. Shortly thereafter, the City Commission once again approved money to add the much-needed annex to the structure. Another $51,000 was appropriated for the annex, and building began right away on the 24,000 square feet of flat floor space. Plans were immediately made to bring national expositions and meetings to the city. Now the city was set for space for the foreseeable future. With 13,000 square feet of floor space in the Coliseum, with seating for 1,800 on the main floor, 1,200 in the balconies, and temporary seating to increase that number by another 1,000. The floor could be flat for dancing or inclined for concerts and road shows. The stage was now 75 feet wide, 40 feet long, with 12 dressing rooms, a switchboard, and 3 lighting circuits. The annex had a 50 by 90 foot wide wooden flat floor, which was perfect for basketball and indoor tennis. The rest was concrete floor that could hold machinery, and the annex could seat 7,000 for banquets, and a kitchen being added for that reason. In 1937, an armory was added to the complex along Dakota Avenue. The brick and stone building provided room for the National Guard and added another dimension to the campus. The new compound was a success. other cities visited and modeled their new structures after Sioux Falls. In a one-year period in the late 1930s, over 60 conventions and 400 sales meetings were hosted there. Vaudeville acts, concerts, dancing girls, Sioux Falls auto shows, a carnival, the Shrine Circus, roller skating shows, teachers' conventions, church meetings, wrestling and boxing matches, plays, and even the Minnehaha County Fair were just a small fraction of the events happening at the Coliseum and Annex. Train cars filled with instruments, set pieces, lights, costumes, and props would routinely pull up just a block away. Newspaper clippings from the 1930s, 40s, and into the early 50s list a who's who of celebrities and touring acts performing in the Coliseum. Ed Sullivan's Toast of the Town, the Grand Ole Opry, and even the Harlem Globetrotters graced the same halls as George Gershwin, Katharine Hepburn, Cab Calloway, Barbara Stanwyck, Al Jolson, heavyweight boxing champ Jack Dempsey, Jeanette MacDonald, John Barrymore, Ethel Barrymore, Henry Fonda, Liberace, Sammy Davis Jr., and Spike Jones were all there during the golden age of the Coliseum. As the 1950s grew close, debate once again shifted to the need for a larger building. The city was growing, and as more people had access to automobiles, attendance from the surrounding towns increased for many of the shows, concerts, and sporting events. A fire in 1950 brought that issue to the forefront. A Huron basketball game had ended at 9:30 p.m., and fire was discovered by 10:30 and was put out by midnight. It had started underneath the auditorium stage and caused $75,000 worth of damage. The asbestos curtain saved the rest of the building from the flames. Events were quickly moved to other areas of town as the debate to the future of the building ignited. As busy as the Coliseum campus was, it had been surpassed in recent years by Des Moines, Sioux City, and Aberdeen, and even Huron was in the planning stages of an auditorium to seat 6,000 people. The idea of a brand new arena was put to a vote in April of 1950, a possible $1.5 million auditorium arena that would seat 3,000 in a theater and 7,000 in the athletic arena was proposed. The vote lost by a margin of 4-1, and within days, insurance money was allocated to restoring and modernizing the Coliseum. The new stage was lowered 15 inches, new curtains added, fireproofing measures were taken, the building was rewired, and a brand new interior paint job was completed. The addition of a state-of-the-art lighting board added to the updated look and feel of the 33-year-old structure. A year later, a new canopy was added to the front of the Coliseum with tubes of gold neon light around the outer edge. The old marquee had weathered badly and had become an eyesore. The struggle to keep basketball as a mainstay in the annex led to the addition of folding bleachers to seat 1,200 people. While in the Coliseum, the city opted to pour a slanted permanent concrete floor with new, comfortable seats added. The old wooden ramp and folding chairs were eliminated, and the acoustics became excellent. But as the 1950s drew to a close, and despite the renovations, the Coliseum had seen its best days. In 1959, voters finally approved a new arena to be built near Russell Avenue. The new palace to basketball and larger shows was completed in December of 1961. The Coliseum still had a purpose in the city and hosted smaller events like the auto shows, farm shows, antique shows, banquets, and high school dances. In 1972, Democratic Senator George Mcgovern made the Coliseum his presidential election night headquarters. 3 network cameras were on hand when he conceded to Republican Richard Nixon. 1972 also saw remodeling being done on the annex in the lobby, entrances, and roof. Everything stopped in January of 1973 when fire struck again. This time, the blaze destroyed the annex, National Guard Armory, and a livestock building. The original Coliseum was saved. The fire was started in the ceiling where workers had been welding. Once again, the door was open for a new city building project, and ideas about what could be built blossomed. The needs of the city centered around a large flat indoor space similar to what had been destroyed. This time, 30,000 square feet of space, 8,000 square feet larger than the old annex, was proposed. One lobby was created between the new hall and the existing Coliseum, with an expansion of a second-floor meeting space in the lobby a short while later. 1975 was the year that rock concerts came into question. The city decided that none would be allowed in the arena, Coliseum, or new convention hall, formerly called the Annex. Symphonies, small concerts, and even a few traveling shows still use the Coliseum. The convention hall was a staple for dances, product shows, sports, and banquets throughout the next 2 decades. The old Coliseum was passed by in 1993 as voters approved the former Washington High School be renovated into the Washington Pavilion with a 1,900-seat theater, another smaller theater, Civic Fine Arts Center, and Science Discovery Center. The building of the new convention center, attached to the arena a few years later, added to the growing sentiment against the need to keep the Coliseum complex in its current form. Potential disaster was narrowly averted in February of 1994 at the Coliseum. Just 7 hours before the Coliseum would be filled with children for a performance, a 250-square-foot section of the ceiling gave way and crashed onto the floor below, crushing more than a dozen steel seats. Workers in the building setting up for the play heard the ceiling start to crack and ran out just as the plaster and wire netting gave way. Luckily, no one was hurt, but the future of the 77-year-old building was once again quickly brought to the forefront. As city commissioners, architects, and citizens began to debate what should be done next, another portion of the ceiling collapsed, crushing more seats. This reinforced in the minds of many that it was time to tear down the historic structure. Talks had already been in the works prior to the collapse between the city and Minnehaha County in the hopes that the county would purchase the Coliseum complex. In December of 1994, the county bought the building from the city for $1 and leased the convention hall area, now called the Rec Center, back to the city of Sioux Falls for 5 years. A task force was created, and debates surfaced over the years as to what the fate of the building would be. It cost the county very little to let it sit as it was until a proper plan was put in place. It was stated, creative people can come up with a good use for the building. Once it's gone, it's gone. And that was the findings of the task force. They recommended saving and eventually restoring the Coliseum. Except for the ceiling, the building was structurally sound and in remarkably good condition. A proposal was made to tear down the attached rec center for more parking and renovate the main building. And then, yet again, another push was made to just bring down the entire complex. In a close public vote in April of 2001, the Coliseum was saved from the wrecking ball. In 2002, the governor announced a $1.8 million restoration project to refurbish the interior for use as a multicultural center. Much of the charm and historic nuances that made the building unique were brought back to life and uncovered after years of neglect and additions. The seats on the floor were all removed, and a flat floor space created. Woodwork and ornate moldings were cleaned up, and the interior space was refreshed with new offices being added. The county and city both realized they needed more space. Plans were looked at to use the rec center and simply add another floor, but structurally, the building wasn't able to accommodate it. Soon, the rec center was brought down to make way for a new structure. In 2007, the county moved its Health and Human Services Division, and the city brought over the health clinic, dental clinic, laboratory, and environmental health services to the new attachment. Where once flat floor space provided citizens entertainment, including dances, banquets, basketball games, and trade shows, now was a home to helping individuals in a variety of ways. 2009 brought about an exterior renewal project to the Coliseum to replace the metal panels with historically accurate windows and other modifications to bring it back to its 1917 appearance. Tuck pointing, canopy restoration, re-roofing, historic iron, glass and gable renovation, and reinstallation of stained glass windows were among the many items in the remodeling project that had its rededication and ribbon cutting in June of 2010. The new era of the Coliseum has seen its resurgence as a gathering place. The Multicultural Center is a state-licensed after-school facility with free services to all and assists children with a variety of programs throughout the year. Adult education also assists many in our community with language classes, job skills programs, driver's education, interpreting services, and immigration services. Many festivals and celebrations now call the Multicultural Center its home, including the Dr. King Day celebration, Native American Day, Wachipi, Festival of Cultures, and so much more. Banquets and wedding receptions are still as popular as they were 100 years ago in the Coliseum, with guests marveling at the history surrounding them, many patrons fondly remembering attending events at the Coliseum as a child so many years ago. The Coliseum hasn't always had an easy time throughout the years. From public votes to fires to the ceiling collapse, the building has undergone many hardships in the past century. But along with those tough times have also been some world-class shows, concerts, plays, comedians, dancers, presidential speeches, sporting events, and so many other amazing performances. The building and the surrounding campus have evolved over the years to meet the needs of the current generation and will most likely continue to do so far into the future. Civic Pride built the Coliseum, and Civic Pride will see its grandeur continue for years to come.